Finally, we can move on to cascading. I hope that everything becomes clear after this video. Just remember that the knowledge I am presenting here also requires practice. I will try to bring you closer to the subject of cascading as best as possible, but in fact you will see the patterns of its mechanics later when doing your own projects. So don't worry too much if you don't find the things covered in this video entirely clear. Everything will become clear in practice. Cascading are the principles the browser follows when selecting a CSS rule to apply to a certain element. Thanks to these principles, we as the web developers know how the browser will behave when choosing the CSS rules to the elements, and this helps us to build the websites. Very often we will encounter a situation in the code where many rules will match the same element, as we can see on this slide. And now the browser has to decide which rule to apply to choose the right color for that element. All of these rules match our P element with the class of red, which we see in the HTML code on the left. Which rule do you think the browser will apply? I can tell you right away that the browser will apply the second rule from the top, that is the indicated P element with the class of red. But on what basis will the browser make such a decision? We will find out about it in a moment. As we already know very well, CSS are cascading style sheets. And cascading is simply a set of principles by which the browser chooses the appropriate CSS rule for a certain element. At the same time, we know that each element has its own set of properties, even if we as the developers have never declared them. Each element at the time of creation in a document object model must have set of properties with the initial values or default browser style values to be rendered on the website. It is the browser that decides which styles to use. It is important to know that the principles followed by the browser when choosing the appropriate styles are common to all the browsers. Cascading will work the same in every browser. Thanks to these principles, we as the developers know what's going to happen in the browser. The only question is, how is this happening? The selectors are a very important aspect of cascading. A lot of our work in learning about cascading is going to be figuring out how important a particular selector is. It is the selector that decides which CSS rule will be used. The browser calculates which selector is the most important. We just need to know how does the browser do it. Let's get to know all the rules of cascading, from the lowest level of importance to the highest level of importance. The browser does it more or less in the same way. If several rules apply to a certain element, the rule with the highest importance will be selected. But let's start from the beginning. I have already talked a lot about the initial values and the default values set by the browser styles. And I did it for a reason. However, you need to know that the initial values and the default browser styles later in our study and your work will not interest us so much. It is only important to know that there is such a thing and know where it comes from. Each element created in a document object model gets a property list with the initial values. This is the first cascading rule, the least important one. Such values from the point of view of cascading have the lowest importance and may be overwritten by all the other styles. The default browser styles still have low importance, but are more important than the initial values. So the default browser styles may override the initial values. As we can see in an example of a body element and its margin property, where it gets 8 pixels margin from the browser, when the initial value for all the elements for this property is 0. The default styles for all the browsers are almost identical. They may have several differences in the implementation of styles, practically impossible to see at first glance. The browser default styles do not apply to all the properties. These styles apply only to certain properties and only to certain elements. Principle 1. No added CSS styles on the website. If we do not add our own CSS styles to our website, we need to know why the font color is black, the font used on the website is Times New Roman, and its size is 16 pixels. And I just wanted to pass this knowledge to you, just to let you know that there are initial values applied to all the elements on our website, which have in part been later overwritten by the default browser styles for some properties for some elements. The default browser styles are there to make the website readable for the user, even if its creator did not take care of its visual aspect. These styles are more important than the initial values and override them. But these styles are also less important than any styles added by the website creator and are overwritten by any styles added by us as the developers. And that is principle 2. Added styles are more important than the default ones. Any styles we add as the website creators will override the initial values and the browser default styles, regardless of whether we add these styles directly in the element with the style attribute, in a head tag of our document, or in an external file. And on our styles we will focus now. As I said, inheritance is very often used in cascading. Some properties are inherited and can be overwritten. We can give the HTML element a color property with the red value, and the elements inside will inherit that color if they don't have their own rules with the color property assigned. An element always inherits from its parent. In this case, the p tag will not inherit 20 pixels from the header tag because its parent is a div tag which has 15 pixels assigned to the font size property. So the p tag will inherit 15 pixels from its parent, which is a div tag. Principle 3. Precision overrides inheritance. If the selector is precise, its properties always override inherited properties. The p tag will inherit the color from its parent, but not the font size. Because the font size property has been assigned precisely to this element, as we can see in the second CSS rule referring to the p tag. Precision means exactly indicating the element that we want to style. Precise selection of an element excludes inheritance. The color is not indicated in our precise rule, so it can be inherited from a parent. But what happens when several rules are precise and match the same element? All of the CSS rules presented here match and relate precisely to our p element. So which one will the browser choose? Which is the most important and why? The browser calculates the most important selector, for which it will apply the rule to style this element. And I am about to present you the method of calculating the most important selector, so that you always know exactly which rule is the most important and which rule will be taken into account by the browser. Here is a metal classification. In my opinion, the best way to calculate the most important selector, which will be taken into account by the browser when applying CSS rules. We divide the selectors into 3 types, for which we can award 3 types of metals. Bronze metals are selectors that refer to the elements, or if you prefer, the tags. Silver metals are selectors that refer to the classes and pseudo-classes. And finally, gold metals are selectors that refer to the identifiers. What is very important? One silver medal is worth more than all bronze medals, and one gold medal is worth more than all silver and bronze medals combined. On this slide, you can see that both of these selectors, so div p and p, refer to the same p element, and they are both precise. They indicate the same precise element. So the decisive factor here is the metal classification. Div p selector have an advantage over the p selector. Its importance is higher. Let's see why. The div p selector has 2 bronze medals, and the p selector has only 1 bronze medal. A bronze medal is awarded for each tag in the selector. 2 bronze medals mean more than 1, So the div p selector is more important. We can also create a longer selector, adding additional bronze medals to its importance. An example of such a selector can be seen at the bottom on this slide. The HTML body div p selector has 4 bronze medals. But we usually don't create the tag-based selectors that long, because no matter how many bronze medals our selector has, using a class that is 1 silver medal will always be more important, and also shorter and more readable. As you can see on this slide, the use of a class which is 1 silver medal will always be more important than all bronze medals, no matter how many there are. As you can see, the use of a class is not only shorter, but also more convenient and cleaner in the code. Using the classes for our selectors is also the most popular way of referring to the elements we want to style. Silver medals apply not only to the classes, but also to the pseudo classes. On this slide, we can see 2 CSS rules. The first rule has 4 bronze medals provided by the tags, and 1 silver medal provided by the pseudo class hover. The second rule, on the other hand, has 2 silver medals, one for the class of red, the other for the pseudo class of hover. 2 silver medals are more important than 1 silver medal. When silver medals are involved, bronze medals do not count at all, no matter how many there are. Gold medals are awarded for identifiers called ID for short. We create an identifier for a certain element in HTML using the ID attribute in the tag. Unlike a class, a particular identifier can only be assigned to one element. We refer to the ID in CSS by the hash symbol. The gold medal is the most important in the medal classification, and always means more than all the silver and bronze medals put together. And what if there's a draw? In both cases, we have 2 bronze medals, so a draw. Which rule will the browser apply? Whenever there's a draw, the browser will use the one that comes after, which is second in this case. So the header p rule will be taken into account. But if we would switch these rules in order, the div p rule would be applied because it would come after the first one in a draw. Remember that in the medal classification, the combinators don't matter. They are irrelevant for cascading. They only determine the degree of the relatedness of the elements, no matter which of them you will use and how many of them there will be. They are not taken into account. Also valid in terms of cascading is the keyword important. It is valid in that sense that it overrides everything else. It goes ahead of the principles of cascading regardless of the medal classification. This keyword should appear immediately after the value has been specified, preceded by an exclamation point. However, it is not recommended to use it because it disturbs the cascading principles. It becomes more important than the gold medal. It is worth knowing the principles of cascading, and when building the websites according to these principles, using the keyword important will be unnecessary. If you use this technique to override the properties and someone will view your code, for example your future employer, they will find out that you don't know how the browser works, and you cannot apply the appropriate value for a given element according to the principles of cascading. So you cheat the system by overriding the values with this keyword, knowing that it will override everything else. Using the keyword important is sloppy and unnecessary when we know cascading very well. What is also worth knowing, and what is also visible on this slide, is that the inline styles, so the styles written in the tag with the style attribute, also have an advantage over all other styles. They even outtake the gold medals in the medal classification. If the keyword important appears in the external file or the style tag, and the same keyword important appears in the inline styles, then this one used in the inline styles has an advantage and will be taken into account. So remember that the inline styles are more important, but let's not write styles this way ourselves. The importance of the inline styles will matter to you in the future as you start learning JavaScript, which I totally recommend. So now, having the appropriate knowledge, we go back to the slide where a few rules match our element, and I would like you to try for yourself to indicate the most important rule that will be applied by the browser according to the cascading principles. Use the metal classification. All the rules are precise and match our element. Pause the video if you want, and I'll be back in a moment with the answer. The answer will be the third rule. Why? We can just count the metals. As we know, the combinators don't matter, so let's focus on the tags and classes. The first rule, which is body div p, consists of 3 tags, that is 3 bronze medals. The second rule, div p, is 2 tags, so 2 bronze medals. The last rule is the p tag with the red class, so 1 bronze medal and 1 silver medal. And the most important rule, which is the third rule, is the div tag with the blue class and the p tag, which gives us 1 silver medal thanks to the blue class used, and 2 bronze medals thanks to the div and p tags used. The asterisk selector behaves in an interesting way. Although it selects all the elements on the page and overrides all default properties and inherited properties, at the same time it has an importance of 0. Using the metal classification, it has no metal, so it might be overwritten by just 1 bronze medal, as you can see on this slide. Although the asterisk comes after, the p tag is more important as it has 1 bronze medal. Finally, I would like to go back to inheritance and show you some examples related to this aspect of cascading. In determining inheritance, importance does not matter. The element that is a parent decides. The p element will be blue because it inherits directly from its parent. Inheritance occurs because the p element is not specified precisely in any selector. We can see that the first rule is more important in the principles of cascading, but the second rule refers to the parent of our p tag. So our p tag will inherit the color from its parent, which is the div tag, and the color will be blue. The importance of these rules would matter only if they were referring precisely to our p tag, but they don't. What if the parent doesn't have a set value? The element that is closer to the final element decides. To determine the value of a parent that has no precise value set, the browser also assigns it as an inherited value. In this case, the p tag inherits the blue color from the div tag, and then the span tag inherits the blue color from the p tag. Inheritance always works from a parent to a child. A lot of theory behind us. We covered many important topics about cascading and how the browser decides which rules to apply to specific elements. So let's move on to practice now to use the knowledge we have just acquired.